Hi everybody, I'm Bob Rae, Canada's ambassador to the United Nations. It's a great pleasure for me to be with all of you, and I look forward to answering your questions and look forward to welcoming you one day to our mission here in New York. Well, it's interesting, the UN Declaration was brought into place 75 years ago, about 3 years after the UN was created. And it was created, I think, to emphasize the fact, although it's stated in the Charter, that basic principles of human rights, equality between all peoples, no discrimination against people on the grounds of race or gender or anything else, ways in which individual freedoms have to be protected, and most importantly of all, the fact that we all agree that we're all together subject to the rule of law, to the principle that our rights exist and our rights are to be enforced and protected by international institutions, including the UN and including the International Court of Justice, International Criminal Court, all the agencies of the United Nations. So it's a very important principle, and the UN Declaration was a huge addition to international law when it was adopted. Je pense que comme la décision de l'ONU d'avancer les intérêts de toutes les personnes, parce en disant clairement qu'il y a des droits qui appartiennent aux personnes, aux individus, mais qui sont enchâssés dans le droit international, c'est un moment définitif pour l'ONU, pour les Nations Unies, et même, je dirais, pour le Canada. Parce que je pense que depuis le moment où le Canada a décidé de ratifier la déclaration, je crois qu'à ce moment, le Canada a dit clairement, nous sommes aussi sujets au droit international que tous les autres pays. C'est pourquoi nous avons décidé, par exemple, quand on a passé la déclaration des droits du peuple autochtone, le Canada a décidé de dire, oui, on va enchâsser ces droits dans le droit canadien. C'est ce qu'a fait la province de la Colombie-Britannique. Et le gouvernement fédéral a fait la même chose. Alors, nous avons accepté que personne n'est au-dessus de la loi. Personne n'est plus important que la loi et que la loi applique à tout le monde. Et je crois que c'est une réflexion très importante, même je dirais primordiale, de la part du gouvernement canadien et effectivement de toute la population du pays. The permanent mission is here to advance Canada's interests. Let's be clear about that we have a job to do on behalf of our government to make clear Canada's position on a whole range of social, economic, political issues that affect our country and affect all countries, but also to advance not only our interests, but also our values. And our values, our laws, our approaches to things, so our commitment to the rule of law, our commitment to pluralism, our commitment to ending discrimination against all people all the time, our commitment to peace, our commitment to the resolution of conflict. These are all examples where we are advancing not only the interests of Canada, in which we have to do, which we're, I think, right for us to do, but it's also about talking directly to people about why we think freedom is important, why we think equality is important, and how we think it's good if these things are more highly valued everywhere in the world. Eh bien, les jours sont pleins. D'abord, notre job est d'être certain que nous travaillons ensemble comme équipe. Alors, nous avons une équipe de 25-30 personnes qui sont là pour avancer les intérêts du Canada et les valeurs du Canada. Alors, dans tout le travail que nous faisons, tous les comités, tous les meetings qui ont lieu, toutes les réunions, c'est notre obligation de continuer d'avancer à la fois les intérêts et les valeurs du Canada. Et c'est une journée qui commence à 8h, 8h30, qui termine à la fin non seulement à la fin de la journée, à 5h, mais qui va plusieurs soirs ou plusieurs soirées pour que nous puissions faire le travail qui avance les choses que nous devons avancer. Et c'est intéressant de voir jusqu'à quel point le Canada reste au centre des activités de l'ONU. Nous sommes un des pays les plus importants en donnant des fonds aux Nations Unies. Nous sommes un donateur très important pour toutes les activités économiques, sociales, humanitaires de l'ONU. Et nous sommes très engagés dans tous les comités, dans toutes les activités. Et nous appartenons à beaucoup de groupes d'amis, beaucoup de groupes de gens qui veulent travailler ensemble sur des questions spécifiques, des réfugiés, les enfants dans le conflit, etc. Mais aussi nous appartenons globalement au Commonwealth, à la francophonie, à l'OTAN, maintenant plus important à l'ASEAN sur les pays asiatiques. Alors nous sommes un pays qui est effectivement globaliste par nature. Alors c'est le travail que nous faisons et c'est un travail qui, pour moi, à mon avis, est très important pour le Canada, non seulement pour le gouvernement, mais pour toute la citoyenneté du Canada. I think it's fair to say that John Humphrey was the Canadian who held the pen at the United Nations on human rights, and he worked very closely with Eleanor Roosevelt to bring forward the Declaration. And since that time, the issue of human rights has been really quite fundamental to the approach of Canadian governments of all stripes. So it was a conservative government that was, I think, most active in the fight for equality in South Africa, and really led the way in the UN and also in the Commonwealth for advancing those interests and for protecting human rights. It's also fair to say that more recently on issues affecting the LGBTQ community, I think we've responded really in a position of real leadership in looking at how we can make sure that people's interests are protected, people's rights are protected, not only in Canada but around the world. And we've shared that experience that we've had with those issues. And finally, I think there's some important new frontiers. For me, I think the most important is the rights of the disabled. I think Canada can play a much stronger role in advancing the need to protect and advance the rights of people who have disabilities. That's a very wide number of people in the world, because in many respects, everyone either will or has the potential to become disabled very quickly. After a single accident, a single event, it can happen to anyone. And I think we have to understand that when that happens, solidarity and assistance and recognizing the rights of every person becomes an increasingly important part of what we do here at the UN. I think if I was asked to say what is a definitive moment for Canada at the UN, I think it was the Suez Crisis. Because at the Suez Crisis, you'll recall that the British, the French, the Israelis invaded the Suez Canal because they felt that the nationalization of the canal by the Egyptian president, Nasser, was a threat to commerce. But there were obviously a lot of other interests that were being advanced. And I think it's fair to say that Canada took exception to those decisions, did not think they were appropriate, thought they were unilateral, and did pose a risk to the peace of the world at that time, and that therefore the UN had to find a way to allow those countries to withdraw their troops and allowed for the UN peacekeeping force to intervene in its place. And I do think that's a decision that required coordination with Ottawa, with Washington, with other capitals, here in New York. It also required us to work very, very effectively with a number of all the countries in the UN at the time, and gave us an opportunity to play a role of leadership on a crisis that was very meaningful for the world. And it's a result of that intervention that Mr. Pearson won the Nobel Peace Prize. And so, yeah, I think that was the defining moment. There have been many other moments. We find other ways in which we support and advance the interests and the values of Canada. But this was, I think, a very good example of how that could be done. I'm really glad you're all studying these issues. I think it's great, and encourage you to keep going at it. Please try to follow us on Twitter. Try to follow what we're doing at the Canadian Mission. We're very proud to have you as followers. Engage with us on the efforts that we're making, and when the time comes, come and see us in New York. We'd be glad to see you. Take good care.